On a rainy morning, little Laura's life changed forever. At just 7 years old, she held her mother's hand as they were forced out of the only home they knew, facing the harsh reality of homelessness. As they wandered the streets, Laura found strength in small joys, while her mother, Lucy, battled a relentless struggle with alcoholism. Their journey was filled with pain and loss, but also unexpected kindness from strangers. When tragedy struck, leaving Laura alone, she was determined to survive. Then, one night, a twist of fate brought her into the path of a kind stranger, Albert, who offered her a chance for a new beginning. What started as a night of despair turned into a beacon of hope for a better future. If you are not subscribed, I recommend you subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. The morning rain fell relentlessly as 7-year-old Laura watched her world crumble before her innocent eyes. With her small hand clinging desperately to her mother Lucy's, the two of them stepped out of the modest house they had once called home. The doors were locked, the windows sealed, and the meager belongings they could no longer claim as their own were heartlessly dumped on the sidewalk, like remnants of a life that no longer belonged to them. Lucy, her face etched with exhaustion and despair, knew the harsh truth there was nowhere left for them to go. The crushing weight of being evicted for unpaid rent left them homeless, vulnerable, and adrift in a world that had suddenly become cold and unforgiving. Lucy, burdened by years of battling alcoholism, tried in vain to mask her despair for the sake of her daughter, but each day was a relentless struggle. The deep wounds of her addiction, born out of grief and loss, bled into every aspect of her life. Years earlier, Lucy's world had shattered when Laura's father, a man of unwavering love and tireless effort, was cruelly taken from them by a sudden heart attack. The grief was overwhelming, a darkness that swallowed Lucy whole. Alcohol became her refuge, her means of escaping a reality too painful to bear. Yet this refuge soon turned into a prison, chaining her to a cycle of self-destruction and slowly pulling her further away from her daughter, the one person who needed her the most. The first few weeks on the streets were nothing short of a nightmare. The security and warmth of home were replaced by the biting cold of the night and the ceaseless noise of the city, a stark reminder of the harsh new reality they faced. But amid this bleakness, Laura's childlike innocence shone through. She found fleeting moments of joy in the smallest of things, the bright petals of a flower growing against all odds on the cracked pavement, the kindness in a stranger's eyes. In a community bound together by the shared experience of homelessness, Lucy and Laura found solace among those who had also been forgotten by society, people who, despite their suffering, extended compassion and camaraderie. Among them was Mrs. Molly, an elderly woman with silver hair and a heart full of wisdom. She became a surrogate grandmother to Laura, guiding her with gentle hands and tender words. Mrs. Molly imparted invaluable lessons to the young girl: the importance of honesty, of sticking together, of finding strength in unity. "Out here, we're all family," she would say, a simple yet profound truth that resonated deeply with Laura. Meanwhile, Lucy's battle with her demons only grew fiercer. The temptation of alcohol lurked around every corner, and with each passing day, her hope dwindled. Her health deteriorated rapidly, her once radiant face now gaunt and lifeless, her eyes, once filled with warmth, now hollowed out by regret and despair. Then came the night when the cold was unbearable, and Lucy's frail body finally gave in. Her liver, ravaged by years of drinking, failed her, and without access to the medical care she so desperately needed, she couldn't survive. Laura sat by her mother's side, clutching her hand as the last breath left Lucy's body. The tears that streamed down Laura's face were not just tears of grief, they were tears of a child who had lost everything, and who now faced the terrifying uncertainty of a future without her mother. The next morning, with the help of Mrs. Molly and the other street dwellers, Laura buried Lucy in a simple grave, marked by a rough stone. As she stood by her mother's final resting place, Laura made a silent vow to honor the memory of her mother, to hold on to the values she had learned from both Lucy and the friends she had made on the streets. With resolve born from an unimaginable loss, Laura began to rebuild her life, piece by piece, determined to rise above the ashes of her past and forge a future of strength and survival. Life on the streets was unyielding, but Laura refused to surrender to its harshness. Armed with the strength and resilience instilled in her by her late mother, Lucy, she pushed forward, determined to carry the torch of her mother's memory and fulfill her dream of finding a place she could truly call home. The days following Lucy's death were a crucible of pain and fear for Laura. Without her mother's comforting presence, the 8-year-old found herself grappling with a solitude so profound it threatened to consume her. Forced to confront the biting cold and gnawing hunger alone, she had no choice but to summon a strength she never knew she possessed. On that first night without her mother, Laura sought refuge beneath the awning of a closed shop. The unforgiving winter wind sliced through her thin clothing, chilling her to the bone. She curled up tightly, trying desperately to fend off the cold, her small body shivering uncontrollably. Her stomach ached with hunger, but she steeled herself, clinging to the memories of happier times with Lucy. It was the recollection of her mother's warmth and the values of honesty and courage that Lucy had imparted that kept Laura from breaking down. As the days passed, Laura began to navigate her new world. The streets were a maze of danger and despair, but she quickly learned that they also held a community of people who, like her mother, had been dealt a cruel hand by life. Among them was George, a middle-aged man whose kind eyes belied the hardship he had endured. He noticed the young girl wandering alone and took it upon himself to guide her. George taught Laura the hard-earned secrets of survival, where to scavenge for food, which areas to avoid, and the best spots to take shelter when the night turned particularly brutal. Through George, Laura also met others, including Mrs. Molly, whose warmth and wisdom made her a grandmotherly figure in Laura's life. Mrs. Molly was a beacon of strength amidst the despair. Despite her struggles, she always found a way to extend a hand to those in need. For Laura, she became a source of comfort and guidance, her words often a balm for the young girl's troubled heart. Life on the street is merciless, Mrs. Molly would say, but it's still life, and as long as we have each other, we can survive under Mrs. Molly's watchful eye, and with George's support, Laura slowly began to develop a resilience that belied her years. She learned to confront adversity head-on and to think quickly and creatively when faced with challenges. On particularly cold nights, she drew upon the lessons George and Mrs. Molly had taught her, seeking out safer shelters and building small fires from discarded scraps to keep warm. Amidst the relentless struggle, Laura found unexpected moments of joy. The camaraderie she shared with her newfound street family brought laughter and solace, even in the darkest of times. Around a crackling fire, they swapped stories, their voices a comforting murmur in the cold night air. This unlikely family became Laura's anchor, giving her the strength to persevere. She learned to cherish the small victories, finding a warm meal, securing a new blanket, and these moments, however fleeting, filled her with a renewed determination. Though life on the streets was a constant battle, Laura was unwavering in her resolve. Every hardship she endured, every obstacle she overcame, only served to strengthen her spirit. The promise she had made to herself and her mother to one day leave the streets behind and find a home remained a guiding light in her heart. Laura knew that the road ahead would be long and fraught with difficulties, but with the resilience she had nurtured and the support of her street family, she was determined to fight for a brighter future. And so, with each passing day, the young girl continued to face the harshness of life with courage and hope. Her mother's memory and teachings were always close to her heart. One cold, starry night, the kind where the wind seemed to slice through flesh like icy blades, Laura, now 9 years old, huddled beneath the awning of a closed shop, wrapped in the thin blanket she had acquired the previous day. Her sharp eyes scanned the streets, ever vigilant for danger or the faint glimmer of opportunity that might lead her closer to the home she so desperately sought. Out of the blue, a sleek black luxury car glided to a stop in front of a well-known restaurant that exuded elegance and sophistication. The restaurant, with its glittering chandeliers and high-profile clientele, was a world apart from Laura's harsh reality. She had often gazed at places like this from afar, acutely aware that the people who frequented them lived lives that were as distant from hers as the stars in the sky. Today, she watched with wide eyes as an impeccably dressed man stepped out of the car. He was tall, with distinguished gray hair and an air of effortless authority. His tailored suit hinted at a life of comfort and success, and he carried himself with the confidence of someone who had always known the taste of victory. But as he exited the car, his wallet slipped from his pocket and quietly slid to the curb, unnoticed. The man walked into the restaurant without a second glance, oblivious to his loss. From her hidden vantage point, Laura saw the wallet fall. For a fleeting moment, she hesitated, torn between the temptation of an easy gain and the values of honesty her mother and the street community had instilled in her. The struggle was brief. She knew what she had to do. With determination, she dashed to the curb, picked up the wallet, and waited patiently. She was certain the man would soon realize what had happened and come searching for it. Sure enough, it wasn't long before Albert Morgan, a renowned lawyer with a reputation to match his polished exterior, reappeared on the sidewalk, his face etched with panic. His eyes darted frantically, scanning the ground in a desperate search for his missing wallet. Relief washed over him when he spotted Laura, a small and fragile girl, holding the wallet in her hands. "Sir, I believe this belongs to you," Laura said quietly, extending the wallet toward him. Albert paused, taken aback by the honesty in her young eyes. He hadn't expected a gesture so pure from someone so small and seemingly vulnerable. A warm smile spread across his face as he accepted the wallet, gratitude evident in his expression. "Thank you, my dear," Albert said, his voice filled with sincerity. "You've truly saved my day." As he looked closer, he noticed the ragged state of her clothes, the signs of a difficult life etched into her small frame. His curiosity deepened. "What's your name?" "Laura," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Laura, I'd like to show you my appreciation properly. Would you join me for dinner?" Inside Albert's invitation was kind, and his eyes reflected a genuine concern for her well-being. Laura hesitated, her heart racing. She had never stepped foot in such a place, and the idea made her nervous. But the warmth in Albert's eyes reassured her, and the rumbling in her empty stomach made the offer of a hot meal irresistible. "Okay," she agreed softly. Albert's smile widened as he led her into the restaurant. As they crossed the threshold, Laura was immediately overwhelmed by the splendor that surrounded her. The crystal chandeliers cast a warm, golden glow over the beautifully arranged tables, and the soft strains of classical music filled the air. It was a far cry from the cold, unforgiving streets she knew so well. The security guard shot her a surprised look, but remained silent when he saw she was with Albert. They were seated at a table by the window, and within moments, a waiter appeared, ready to take their orders. Overwhelmed by the opulence and unsure of what to choose, Laura let Albert decide for them both. As they waited for their food, Albert watched her with quiet curiosity. There was something about this young girl so small, yet so brave, that intrigued him. When the waiter brought the menu and began to describe the house specials, Laura's eyes wandered around the room, drinking in the details. The warmth of the restaurant was a welcome contrast to the biting cold outside, and for the first time in a long while, she felt safe. It was a feeling she had nearly forgotten. "Let's order something delicious, Laura." "You deserve it," Albert said, his voice gentle and reassuring. Laura nodded, starting to feel a bit more at ease. As he placed their orders, she felt a strange comfort in his presence. Her stomach growled with anticipation, and for just a moment she allowed herself to relax and forget about the hardships that awaited her beyond those doors. That night, in that luxurious restaurant, marked the beginning of a new chapter in Laura's life. The welcoming warmth, the soft lights, and the gentle music created an atmosphere that felt almost magical to her. Sitting across from Albert, she couldn't help but feel as if she were living a dream, one where, just for a little while, the world wasn't so harsh and she wasn't so alone. While they waited for the food to arrive, Albert attempted to engage Laura in light conversation, hoping to ease the tension. However, he quickly sensed her anxiety and shyness, realizing that this was a girl who had been through more than most could imagine. Deciding to give her the space she needed, he chose to let the silence linger, offering her the time to feel at ease. When the dishes were finally placed before them, the rich aromas filled the air, and Laura's eyes widened with a mixture of surprise and gratitude. "You can eat as much as you want," Laura Albert said kindly, his warm smile encouraging her. "Don't worry about anything." Laura started to eat cautiously, savoring each bite, but soon her hunger took over, and she found herself devouring the food with an enthusiasm that spoke volumes about how long it had been since she'd had a proper meal. Albert watched her with a tender heart, his concern growing with every bite she took. He could see that this little girl had faced unimaginable hardships, and he wanted to learn more about her story to understand how he could help. After a few minutes of quiet, Laura finally looked up, her gaze meeting Albert's. Feeling a bit more comfortable, she began to speak. Her words came out hesitantly at first, but soon the dam broke and her life story poured out with a sincerity that tugged at Albert's heartstrings. She spoke of her father's death, her mother's painful struggle with alcoholism, and the heartbreaking eviction that left them homeless. She recounted the harshness of life on the streets and how her mother's passing had left her utterly alone in the world. Albert listened intently, never interrupting, his heart breaking a little more with each detail. He could see the depth of pain and resilience in Laura's eyes, and it stirred something deep within him. When she finished, Albert took a moment to gather his thoughts, the weight of her story settling heavily in his chest. "Laura, you are an incredibly brave girl," he said softly, his voice filled with admiration. "I can't even begin to imagine how hard it's been for you." Laura just nodded, still a bit shy, her eyes dropping to the table. "I want to help you," Albert continued, his tone gentle but firm. "You can't keep living on the streets. It's not safe, and you deserve so much more. How about you spend the night at my house? You can take a hot bath, have something warm to eat, and sleep in a comfortable bed. How does that sound?" Laura hesitated, her mind racing. The offer seemed almost too good to be true, and she was unsure if she could trust it. But there was something in Albert's eyes, something genuine and kind that made her believe he was sincere. With a small nod, she accepted. "All right," she whispered, barely audible. Albert smiled, visibly relieved. "Wonderful. Let's finish our meal, and then we'll head home. I think you'll like it." After they finished eating, Albert drove Laura to his house. During the ride, Laura gazed out the window, her heart fluttering with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. When they arrived, she was taken aback by the warmth and coziness of the home. It was nothing like the cold streets she had grown accustomed to. Albert showed her to the bathroom, handing her clean, warm clothes. Laura spent what felt like an eternity in the bath, letting the hot water wash away not just the grime of the streets, but also some of the burden she had been carrying. When she finally emerged, dressed in comfortable clothes, she felt lighter, as though a small part of her past had been left behind in that bathtub. Albert, waiting patiently, had prepared a cup of hot tea for Laura. He led her to a cozy room where the bed, with its soft mattress and warm blankets, felt like the ultimate luxury. As she lay down, sinking into the comfort, Albert smiled at her, pleased to see her so at peace. "Good night, Laura." "Sleep well," he said gently, turning off the light and quietly closing the door behind him. Lying in the darkness, Laura reflected on everything that had happened. For the first time in what felt like forever, she felt safe, truly safe and cared for. As sleep began to calm her, thoughts of a possible new beginning danced in her mind. The unexpected kindness of a stranger had given her hope, a glimmer of a future that might be brighter than she ever dared to dream. With that thought, she drifted into a deep, peaceful sleep, filled with dreams of the better days that might lie ahead. The next morning, as the first rays of sunlight streamed through the curtains of the cozy room, Laura slowly awoke. For a brief moment, she forgot where she was, the soft bed and warm blankets a stark contrast to the hard, cold streets she had known. But as the memories of the previous night came flooding back, a small smile touched her lips. She was at Albert's house, a place where, for once, she felt truly safe. Reluctant to leave the comfort of the bed, Laura eventually got up and noticed clean clothes neatly folded on a chair by the bedside. After dressing quickly, she followed the inviting scent of fresh coffee and toast downstairs to the kitchen. There, she found Albert, busy preparing breakfast, his back turned to her. The simple, domestic scene filled Laura with a warmth she hadn't felt in years, a warmth that whispered of a fresh start, a new chapter in a life that had known far too much pain. "Good morning, Laura." "Did you sleep well?" Albert asked with a warm smile as she entered the kitchen. "I did. Thank you," Laura replied, her voice still tinged with a hint of shyness. They sat at the table and shared a simple yet hearty breakfast. Albert, sensing her lingering unease, tried to put her at ease by asking about her favorite foods and recounting humorous stories from his work as a lawyer. Gradually, Laura began to relax, finding comfort in the gentle rhythm of this new routine. Over the next few days, Laura slowly adjusted to life in Albert's house. She eagerly took on small household chores, quickly learning how to clean, cook, and organize. It wasn't long before she started to feel more at home. Albert, for his part, did everything he could to create a safe and welcoming environment for her. He bought her new clothes, books to read, and even a few toys, hoping to bring some joy and normalcy into her life. As the days turned into weeks, Laura became more comfortable, and her curiosity about Albert grew. She learned that he was a well-respected lawyer, admired for his integrity and dedication. Despite his professional success, Albert had never married and lived alone in a spacious, well-kept house. One afternoon, as they sat together in the living room, Albert decided to share a more personal part of his life with her. "Laura," he began, his voice thoughtful, "I never married, and I don't have children. A few years ago, I found out that I'm sterile. I can't have biological children. It was a difficult truth to accept, but in time I poured myself into my work and came to terms with it." Laura listened intently, a mix of curiosity and empathy stirring within her. She realized that beneath Albert's seemingly perfect life lay his struggles and heartaches. Despite his successes, he too had faced moments of profound sadness and acceptance. As the days passed, Laura's presence began to change Albert's life in ways he hadn't anticipated. He found himself growing increasingly attached to her, admiring the quiet strength and resilience she exhibited. The idea of adopting Laura began to take shape in his mind, though he approached the thought with caution. Adoption was a significant decision, one that would change both of their lives forever, and Albert wasn't sure if he was ready for such a commitment. To help him navigate his thoughts, Albert sought advice from friends and colleagues, many of whom encouraged him to consider adoption seriously. They pointed out the mutual benefits: a stable, loving home for Laura and the fulfillment of family life for Albert. Despite their encouragement, doubts continued to swirl in his mind. Was he truly prepared to be a father? Could he offer Laura the love and support she needed and deserved? While Albert wrestled with these questions, Laura continued to thrive in her new environment. She embraced her tasks with enthusiasm and showed a keen interest in learning new things, and gradually the spark of hope returned to her eyes, a spark that had dimmed during her time on the streets. With each passing day, the bond between Albert and Laura grew stronger, solidifying into something more profound than either of them had expected. Every shared smile and every small act of kindness deepened Albert's desire to make their arrangement permanent. Yet, he knew he needed to approach the decision with careful consideration. One evening, Albert sat alone in his office, the soft glow of the lamp casting gentle shadows on the walls. In his hands, he held a folder filled with information about the adoption process. He had spent the past few weeks gathering advice, contemplating the pros and cons, and reflecting on the impact this decision would have on both his and Laura's lives. Now, with all the facts laid out before him, the moment of truth had arrived. The arguments for and against adoption weighed heavily on his mind. On one hand, he envisioned offering Laura the stable, loving home she had never known, a home where she could grow, learn, and feel secure. He could provide her with a proper education, safety, and most importantly, a family. But on the other hand, doubts gnawed at him. Could he, a man who had never been a father, truly rise to the occasion? Was he capable of providing Laura with the emotional and practical support she would need as she continued to heal and grow? As he sat in his quiet office, the flickering light of the lamp illuminating the adoption documents, Albert knew that whatever decision he made would shape both of their futures. Deep down, he felt that Laura was already a part of his life, a part of his family. The connection they had formed was undeniable, and with every passing day, the thought of letting her go became less bearable. With a deep breath, Albert set the folder down and leaned back in his chair. The path ahead wasn't entirely clear, but one thing was certain: he wanted to give Laura the life she deserved. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he was ready to face them, not just for himself, but for the little girl who had already found a place in his heart. As Albert sat in his office, reflecting on the moments he had shared with Laura over the past few weeks, he couldn't help but be struck by how much she had become a part of his life. He remembered the joy in her eyes when she learned something new, the way her face lit up when she talked about her dreams, and the quiet contentment she exuded during their shared meals. Her presence had filled his once empty home with warmth and a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. Yet beneath these warm feelings, a nagging fear persisted. What if he failed to meet Laura's emotional and psychological needs? Despite his best intentions, what if he couldn't give her the love and support she so desperately needed? Meanwhile, in her room, Laura wrestled with her whirlwind of emotions. Albert's house was beginning to feel like home, a place where she could finally let down her guard. The daily routines, the dinner conversations, the laughter, and the learning all made her feel as if she belonged to a family once more. But a shadow of fear still loomed over her heart. What if this newfound security was only temporary? What if, at any moment, she could be sent back to the streets? Each time Albert left for work or attended a meeting, she worried, wondering if he was reconsidering her place in his life. The uncertainty gnawed at her, making it difficult to focus on her tasks and studies. Albert was acutely aware of Laura's apprehension. He saw the same insecurity in her eyes that he felt in his own heart. He realized that they both needed clarity and reassurance. It was time for an honest conversation, time to lay their fears on the table and face them together. That evening, after dinner, Albert asked Laura to join him in the living room. "Laura, I've been doing a lot of thinking about us and the future," he began, trying to keep his voice steady despite the weight of his emotions. "I know all of this must be confusing and scary for you, but I want you to know that you're very important to me." Laura looked at him, her eyes a mixture of hope and fear. "I like being here with you too, Albert," she replied, her voice trembling. "But I'm scared of having to go back to the streets." Albert gently took her hands in his, squeezing them with tenderness. "I understand your fear, Laura, and I want you to know that I'm doing everything I can to make the best decision for both of us. I know adoption is a big step, and I still have some doubts, but I desire to give you a safe and loving home." Laura nodded, her anxiety giving way to a glimmer of relief. The conversation didn't eliminate all her worries, but knowing that Albert was seriously considering adoption and genuinely cared about her brought her a sense of comfort she hadn't felt in a long time. With this newfound understanding, both Albert and Laura took strength in the hope for a brighter future. Over the next few weeks, Albert continued to reflect deeply on the decision, speaking openly with Laura and seeking advice from those he trusted. The more he pondered, the more certain he became that adopting Laura was the right thing to do. Finally, with a resolute heart, he decided to move forward with the adoption process. On the morning of their first meeting with the social worker, Laura was nervous but also filled with excitement. Dressed in the new clothes Albert had bought for her, she looked like any other ordinary girl, but the wisdom and pain of her experiences on the streets were still reflected in her eyes. "It's going to be okay," Laura Albert reassured her as they waited in the reception area of the social services office. "Just be yourself. They're just here to get to know you better." Laura nodded, trying to muster a smile. When the social worker, a middle-aged woman with a kind and gentle demeanor, called them in, Laura squeezed Albert's hand tightly, seeking comfort. The first interviews were difficult. Laura had to recount the painful memories of her past, speaking about her life on the streets and the loss of her mother. But through her honesty and resilience, Laura's strength shone through. She spoke of the values her mother had taught her, the importance of honesty and solidarity, and how Albert had given her hope when she needed it most. The social worker was deeply moved by Laura's maturity and Albert's dedication. Together, they navigated each stage of the adoption process, from home visits to psychological evaluations and interviews. As time went on, the bond between Albert and Laura only grew stronger. Each interaction, each shared moment, reinforced their connection. During one of the home visits, the social worker observed the interaction between Albert and Laura. She noted how attentive Albert was to Laura's needs and emotions, and how Laura, in turn, showed genuine affection and respect for Albert. "It's clear that you two share a very special bond," the social worker remarked during one of their evaluations. "That's crucial for the adoption process." Albert smiled, feeling a wave of relief, and glanced at Laura, who returned his smile with eyes that sparkled with hope. The following months were filled with anticipation and anxiety as they navigated each step of the adoption journey. With every stage completed, they drew closer to officially becoming a family. Meanwhile, life at Albert's house settled into a comfortable routine. Laura was excelling in school, making new friends and exploring her interests. Albert, too, found himself embracing the role of father with surprising ease. He discovered within himself an infinite capacity for love, patience, and dedication that he hadn't known existed. As they moved closer to the final stages of the adoption process, Albert realized that his initial fears had slowly dissipated. The doubts that once plagued him had been replaced by a deep sense of certainty. He knew now, without a doubt, that Laura belonged in his life, that she was his family. As they continued this journey together, both Albert and Laura found that the future they once feared had transformed into a future filled with promise, love, and endless possibilities. The nights in Albert's home were now filled with warmth and joy, bedtime stories that sparked Laura's imagination, laughter that echoed through the dining room, and deep conversations that delved into dreams, fears, and everything in between. Their bond grew stronger with each passing day, creating a sense of belonging that neither had experienced before. One late afternoon, after yet another round of interviews for the adoption process, they returned home tired but hopeful. Albert settled onto the sofa with Laura by his side, and as he looked at the girl who had come to occupy such a large place in his heart, a wave of emotion swept over him. "We're almost there, Laura," he said softly, draping his arm around her shoulders. "I know this process has been tough, but we're doing it together, and that's what matters most." Laura rested her head on Albert's shoulder, feeling a deep sense of safety and love that she had longed for. "I know, Albert, and I'm really happy about that," she replied, her voice filled with quiet contentment. Day by day, step by step, the bond between Albert and Laura solidified. The adoption process was indeed arduous, filled with paperwork, interviews, and endless waiting, but each challenge they faced only strengthened their resolve and deepened their connection. They were no longer just a man and a girl trying to build a new life. They were becoming a true family, bound by love, trust, and mutual respect. Before they knew it, the day of the final adoption hearing arrived. It came faster than either of them had expected, bringing with it a mix of nervous anticipation and cautious optimism. That morning, they sat side by side in the courtroom, the gravity of the moment pressing down on them. Albert held Laura's hand tightly, offering her the comfort and security she needed. The judge, a middle-aged man with a kind and thoughtful expression, entered the room and began reviewing the case. After what felt like an eternity, the judge looked up from the documents and met their gaze. "Mr. Morgan, Laura," he began, his tone gentle, "I've reviewed all the material related to your case. It's clear that you've formed a strong and loving bond." He paused, allowing a slight smile to spread across his face. "I am pleased to announce that the adoption is officially approved. Congratulations, you are now officially father and daughter." For a moment, Laura could hardly believe what she was hearing. Tears of joy welled up in her eyes, spilling down her cheeks as she turned and threw her arms around Albert. He hugged her tightly, his own emotions threatening to overwhelm him. "We're a family now, Laura," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "Yes, we are," Laura replied, her face radiant with happiness. With the adoption finalized, a new chapter began for Laura. She started attending a nearby school with excellent facilities and dedicated teachers. On her first day, she felt a mixture of anxiety and excitement, but Albert was there to walk her to the school gate, offering words of encouragement and support. "You'll do great, Laura," he reassured her with a smile. "Just be yourself and show everyone what you're capable of." Laura nodded, her confidence bolstered by Albert's belief in her. The first few weeks at school were challenging as she adjusted to her new environment, but it didn't take long for her to stand out. Her teachers quickly recognized her intelligence and dedication, and Laura soon became involved in various extracurricular activities, from the reading club to the math team. As the months passed and Laura's report cards came in, Albert's pride grew. He watched her progress with a mix of joy and admiration. Laura was not only excelling academically but was also making new friends and blossoming into a confident, determined young woman. Her resilience, combined with her eagerness to learn, impressed everyone around her. One evening, as Laura sat at the kitchen table working on her homework, Albert approached and took a seat beside her. "I'm so proud of you, Laura," he said, his voice warm and sincere. "You've been working so hard and showing incredible talent. I want you to know that I'll do everything I can to ensure you have a bright future." Laura looked up at him, her eyes shining with gratitude and affection. "Thank you, Albert," she replied softly. "You've given me a chance for a better life, and I promise I won't waste it." At that moment, both of them knew that the journey they had embarked on together was just the beginning. The future, once uncertain and filled with fear, now glowed with promise and possibility. And as they continued to build their lives together, their bond, now cemented by love, trust, and shared dreams, would only grow stronger. Albert gently stroked Laura's hair, feeling a profound sense of fulfillment for all they had accomplished together. The journey they had embarked on, once filled with uncertainty, had blossomed into a life brimming with love, growth, and shared happiness. As the months turned into years, Laura's life continued to thrive. She excelled in school competitions, earned awards, and became a role model among her peers. Albert, always by her side, ensured that she had every opportunity to grow and explore her potential. The house that had once felt large and empty was now filled with laughter, warmth, and the comforting sounds of a life well lived. Weekends were spent exploring museums, parks, and libraries as they sought out new ways to learn and have fun together. Their bond deepened with every shared experience, solidifying the family they had created. Albert knew that the road ahead would still present challenges, but he was determined to face each one alongside Laura. His promise to provide her with a bright future was not just words, it was a commitment he renewed every day. Together, with love, dedication, and an unwavering belief in the future, Albert and Laura moved forward, building a life full of hope and endless possibilities. The years flew by, and before long, Laura was 17 and navigating the complexities of adolescence. Though she continued to shine academically, the pressures of teenage life began to weigh on her. Friendships became more intricate as social dynamics shifted and relationships evolved. Laura felt the strain of wanting to fit in, to be accepted by her peers, even when it conflicted with her values and sense of self. The demands of school also intensified, with more challenging projects, looming college applications, and heightened expectations. Amidst all this, questions about her past began to surface more frequently. Thoughts of her mother, Lucy, and her father lingered in her mind, stirring a mix of longing and curiosity that she found difficult to reconcile. One evening, after a particularly tough day at school, Laura sat quietly on the porch, her eyes fixed on the starry sky. The weight of her thoughts pressed heavily on her, and she felt a deep ache in her heart. Albert, sensing her distress, decided to join her. He sat down beside her, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Are you okay, Laura?" he asked gently, his voice filled with concern. Laura sighed, her gaze still locked on the stars above. "I'm just thinking about a lot of things, Albert," she said quietly. "Sometimes I miss my mom so much. I wonder about my dad too. I don't remember much about him. When he died, I was so young, and Mom didn't talk about him much. When she did, she always ended up crying. I remember that." Albert took a deep breath, knowing that this was a conversation he had anticipated but also dreaded. He had always known that Laura would eventually seek answers about her past, but it didn't make the moment any less challenging. "I understand, Laura," he said softly. "It's natural to miss them and to have these questions. Your mother, Lucy, was a strong woman. Despite everything she went through, she loved you deeply and did her best to care for you. I'm sure of that, even though I didn't know her personally." Laura turned to look at Albert, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and gratitude. "Thank you, Albert." "I think I needed to hear that," she whispered, her voice tinged with emotion. Albert pulled her into a tight embrace, wanting her to feel the depth of his support and love. "I will always be here for you, Laura," he said with unwavering sincerity. For any questions, for any tough moments, whatever you need. You are my daughter, and I love you very much." At that moment, Laura felt a deep sense of comfort and reassurance. The questions about her past still lingered, but they no longer felt as overwhelming. With Albert by her side, she knew she had the strength to face whatever lay ahead. The bond between them, forged through years of shared experiences and mutual love, was unbreakable. As they sat together under the starry sky, both father and daughter knew that they would continue to face the future with courage, love, and the unshakable belief that, together, they could overcome anything. Laura nestled into Albert's embrace, feeling the warmth of his love enveloping her. "I love you too, Albert, very much," she whispered, the words carrying the depth of her gratitude and affection. The challenges of adolescence didn't magically vanish after that conversation, but something fundamental shifted within Laura. Knowing she could openly discuss her past and her lingering questions with Albert made her feel more resilient and secure. She understood now that, no matter what obstacles lay ahead, she wouldn't have to face them alone. Albert, too, renewed his commitment to being her unwavering support, guiding her through the complexities of adolescence and confronting his uncertainties. The bond between them, rooted in trust and love, only grew stronger with each passing day. At 17, Laura made a life-defining decision she would follow in Albert's footsteps and study law. Inspired by his example of integrity and justice, Laura believed she could make a real difference in the world, especially for those who, like her, had faced immense hardships. The decision to pursue a career in law brought with it a host of new challenges. Law school was demanding far more than Laura had anticipated. The reading assignments were dense, the legal concepts often felt impenetrable, and the exams were relentless. There were nights when Laura sat at her desk, surrounded by casebooks and notes, feeling completely overwhelmed, questioning whether she was truly cut out for this path. One particularly grueling night, Laura found herself struggling to comprehend a complex legal case. Frustration and fatigue had worn her down, and she felt on the verge of giving up. Albert, sensing her distress, walked into the kitchen and sat down beside her. "It looks like you're having a tough night," he observed, his voice gentle and understanding. Laura sighed, rubbing her tired eyes. "It's so much harder than I imagined, Albert. Sometimes I wonder if I made the right choice." Albert smiled, recalling his days of doubt during law school. "I know exactly how you feel. I've been there too. But you're incredibly smart and determined, Laura. I have no doubt you can overcome these challenges. And remember, I'm always here to help you through it." With Albert's steadfast support, Laura began to regain her confidence. He spent hours with her, reviewing cases, explaining difficult concepts, and sharing stories from his legal career. His patience and encouragement became a constant source of motivation for her. Beyond her academic pursuits, Laura also started to engage in social causes, something she had always been passionate about. She joined a group of law students who provided free legal assistance to underprivileged communities, finding a renewed sense of purpose in helping others. During one of her visits to a local shelter where they offered legal aid, Laura met Mrs. Mary, an elderly woman who had been living on the streets and needed help securing her social benefits. Mrs. Mary's story deeply resonated with Laura, evoking memories of the difficult times she and her mother had endured. "I'll help you, Mrs. Mary," Laura promised, her voice filled with determination. "We'll get you the benefits you deserve." Laura and her fellow students worked tirelessly on Mrs. Mary's case, gathering documents, navigating bureaucratic hurdles, and presenting strong legal arguments. The process was long and arduous, but Laura's persistence paid off when they finally succeeded in getting Mrs. Mary's benefits approved. "Thank you, my dear," Mrs. Mary said, her eyes brimming with tears of gratitude. "You've changed my life." Laura felt a profound sense of pride and fulfillment. She knew she was on the right path, not just in her studies, but in her life's mission. Each case she took on, and each person she helped, reinforced her commitment to justice and equality. The impact she was making, no matter how small, was real and meaningful. As Laura continued to excel in her studies and her social work, Albert watched with growing admiration and pride. He knew that the road ahead would still be filled with challenges, but he also knew that Laura possessed the strength, resilience, and compassion to overcome them. By choosing to pursue a career in law and dedicating herself to social causes, Laura was not only building a promising future for herself, but also giving back to society in a way that honored the values instilled in her by her mother and Albert. Step by step, Laura advanced on her journey, determined to make a difference and create a better world for those who needed it most. And with Albert by her side, she knew that no challenge was too great, no goal too distant. Together they had overcome so much, and together they would continue to build a future filled with hope, purpose, and endless possibilities. The morning of Laura's graduation dawned with a brilliant, clear sky, as if nature itself was celebrating the milestone. Albert stood in the doorway, his heart swelling with pride as he watched Laura, now a poised and confident young woman, adjust her graduation cap in the mirror. The girl he had once found on the streets had blossomed into a determined and accomplished individual, ready to embrace the world with open arms. "You look beautiful," Laura Albert said, his voice thick with emotion. "Today is a big day." Laura turned to him, her smile radiant, though a touch of nervousness lingered in her eyes. "Thank you, Albert. I wouldn't be here today if it weren't for you." The graduation ceremony was both solemn and deeply emotional. As the graduates sat in neat rows, Albert found himself reflecting on the incredible journey they had shared. The college president delivered an inspiring speech, emphasizing the hard work, perseverance, and growth the students had shown over the years. But Albert's focus was solely on Laura, waiting eagerly for the moment her name would be called. Finally, the moment arrived. The speaker's voice echoed through the hall, "Laura Morgan, with honors." The auditorium erupted in applause as Laura made her way to the stage. Albert's eyes filled with tears of pride, the emotions of the day overwhelming him. The journey that had begun with so much uncertainty had led to this, a moment of pure triumph. He watched as Laura accepted her diploma, her face glowing with the satisfaction of her hard-earned achievement. After the ceremony, the crowd spilled outside, where graduates and their loved ones gathered to celebrate. Albert found Laura amid the sea of joyful faces and pulled her into a tight embrace, holding her close as the significance of the day washed over them both. "Congratulations, Laura," he said, his voice filled with love and pride. "You deserve every bit of this moment. I'm so incredibly proud of you." "Thank you, Dad," Laura replied, the word Dad infused with all the love and gratitude she felt. It was a title she had come to embrace fully, and it meant the world to both of them. "I couldn't have done this without your support." Albert wiped away a tear, his smile broad as he looked at the daughter he cherished. They took photos, shared laughter, and swapped stories with friends and fellow graduates, each moment a memory to treasure. That evening, they gathered for a special dinner to celebrate Laura's achievement. The atmosphere was warm and filled with joy, but as the meal progressed, Laura grew thoughtful. When the moment felt right, she cleared her throat, drawing everyone's attention. "I've been thinking a lot about what I want to do next," she began, her gaze steady as she looked at Albert and the friends around the table. "And I've made a decision. I want to dedicate my career to defending the rights of the underprivileged. I want to give back, to help those who need it most, just like I was helped." The room fell silent for a moment as her words sank in. Then, one by one, smiles and nods of approval spread around the table. Albert's heart swelled with pride once again, knowing that Laura was not only choosing a path of purpose but also one that honored the values they had built their lives upon. "I'm so proud of you," Laura Albert said, his voice filled with admiration. "Your decision is a testament to your character and everything you've overcome. The world needs more people like you, people who care, who are willing to fight for what's right." Laura smiled, her eyes meeting Albert's with a deep sense of understanding and connection. "I learned from the best," she replied softly. As they toasted to the future, there was a palpable sense of hope and excitement in the air. Laura's journey was far from over, but with Albert by her side and her heart set on making a difference, she was ready to take on whatever challenges lay ahead. Together they had come so far, and together they would continue to build a future filled with love, justice, and the unwavering belief that they could make the world a better place. Albert nodded, his heart swelling with renewed pride. He knew that Laura's decision was not just a career choice but a reflection of her deep character and the values she had embraced throughout her life. "I always knew you would do something incredible, Laura," he said warmly, "and I have no doubt you'll make a huge difference in so many people's lives." The months that followed were a whirlwind of intense preparation and new beginnings. Laura secured a position at a law firm that specialized in human rights and social causes, a perfect fit for her passion and dedication. From her very first day, it was clear that she was determined to make an impact. She dove headfirst into challenging cases, tirelessly fighting for justice and equality. Albert remained her steadfast supporter, offering advice when needed and always being there to cheer her on. He saw the fierce determination in her eyes and knew she was exactly where she needed to be. With Albert's unwavering support and the respect of her colleagues and community, Laura embarked on her career with a sense of purpose and a drive to make the world a better place. She dedicated herself to defending the rights of the underprivileged, determined to fight for those who couldn't fight for themselves. The future was bright, and Laura was committed to leaving her mark on the world. Laura's first day at the law firm was a significant milestone in her journey. The firm, though small and modest, had a reputation for taking on cases that other lawyers often avoided, cases involving the rights of the homeless, workers facing exploitation, and systemic injustices that plagued society's most vulnerable. For Laura, it was the perfect environment to apply her knowledge, compassion, and passion for justice. From the outset, Laura was thrown into a demanding workload. The cases she handled were complex and varied, each requiring not only legal expertise but also a deep sense of empathy and understanding. She quickly found herself working alongside like-minded colleagues who shared her dedication to social justice. Together, they tackled the formidable task of challenging a system often indifferent to the plight of those in need. As time went on, Laura became increasingly involved in high-impact cases that addressed pressing social issues. She worked tirelessly to defend the rights of the homeless, fought against illegal evictions, and advocated for child protection. Each victory, no matter how small, was a testament to her commitment and strengthened her resolve to continue her fight for justice. One afternoon, after achieving another significant legal victory, Albert decided to visit Laura at her office. As he approached her door, he paused for a moment to admire the plaque that read, "Laura Morgan, Social Causes Lawyer." His heart swelled with pride as he realized how far she had come. Entering her office, he was greeted by the sight of Laura surrounded by files and papers, her workspace a testament to the hard work and dedication she poured into every case. They sat down together, and Albert couldn't help but express his admiration. "You're doing an incredible job, Laura," he said, his voice filled with pride. "You've accomplished so much already, and I know you're just getting started." "Thank you, Dad," Laura replied, her smile warm and genuine. "Every victory, every small change we make, reminds me why I chose this path. I want to make a difference, and I think I'm succeeding." Albert nodded, his eyes reflecting the confidence he had in her. He knew that Laura was destined for great things, not just because of her legal skills, but because of her courage, empathy, and unwavering commitment to justice. She was more than just an exceptional lawyer, she was a natural leader and an inspiration to everyone around her. As Laura continued her work, new challenges emerged daily, but she faced them with the same determination and passion that had driven her from the very beginning. She was prepared for whatever lay ahead, armed with the experience, knowledge, and deep sense of justice that had shaped her journey. With each case she took on, Laura moved closer to achieving her goal of creating a more just and equitable world, and Albert couldn't have been prouder of the woman she had become. And so, with Albert's unwavering support and the deep respect of her community, Laura firmly established herself as a tireless advocate for the rights of the underprivileged, building a legacy of justice, compassion, and hope. Her journey was one of resilience and determination, driven by the belief that everyone, no matter their circumstances, deserved dignity and a chance to rebuild their lives. One sunny afternoon, while walking downtown on her way to a meeting, Laura found herself unexpectedly transported back to a time she thought she had left behind. As she passed through a park, she noticed a group of homeless people gathered together. Something about the scene tugged at her, compelling her to stop and observe. As she scanned the faces marked by time and adversity, a familiar figure caught her eye. "Mrs. Molly," Laura whispered, her heart skipping a beat. The elderly woman, Her gray hair, now whiter and her frame more frail, lifted her eyes, and after a moment of uncertainty, a smile of recognition spread across her weathered face. "Laura, is that you, my child?" Mrs. Molly asked, her voice trembling with emotion as tears welled up in her eyes. They embraced, and as they held each other, a flood of memories washed over Laura. Mrs. Molly had been a motherly figure to her during the darkest days on the streets, offering comfort and guidance when she needed it most. Sitting beside Mrs. Molly on the park bench, listening to her stories once again, Laura felt a bittersweet mix of nostalgia and sadness. "I never forgot you, Mrs. Molly," Laura said softly, holding her old friend's hands tightly. "You helped me when I had nowhere else to turn." As they talked, Laura was reminded of how far she had come, but also of how much more work remained to be done for those still struggling on the streets. The reunion stirred something deep within her, a renewed sense of purpose and responsibility. Returning home that night, Laura couldn't stop thinking about Mrs. Molly and the others she had seen that day. She knew she had to do something more, something significant, to give back to the community that had once supported her when she was most vulnerable. The next day, Laura approached Albert with a resolute expression. "Albert, I need to talk to you," she said, her voice carrying the weight of her decision. "Of course, Laura. What's on your mind?" Albert asked, setting down his book, noticing the seriousness in her tone. "Today I reconnected with Mrs. Molly and some other friends from my time on the streets," Laura began, her voice tinged with emotion. "It was wonderful to see them, but it was also a painful reminder of how much suffering still exists out there. I've been given so much, and now I want to give back. I want to create an organization to help the homeless, to provide the support I received. And even more, I want to help them find a way out of the streets, just like you helped me." Albert's eyes filled with pride as he listened to her. "That's a beautiful idea, Laura," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You've always had a big heart, and I'm sure you'll make a tremendous difference in their lives." With Albert's encouragement and support, Laura set to work on her new mission. She began gathering colleagues from the legal field, social workers, and volunteers who shared her passion and vision. She decided to name the organization New Beginning, a fitting symbol of the hope and opportunities she wanted to offer to those who needed them most. The mission of New Beginning was clear and ambitious: to provide legal assistance, temporary shelter, nutritious food, and most importantly, rehabilitation and reintegration programs for the homeless. Laura wanted to give everyone a second chance, just as she had been given. The first few months were challenging but rewarding. Laura worked tirelessly, organizing fundraising events, forming partnerships with local businesses, and raising awareness about the plight of the homeless. Every small success was a victory that energized the entire team and reinforced their commitment to the cause. At the inauguration event for New Beginning, with many supporters, volunteers, and beneficiaries in attendance, Laura took to the stage. Her voice, filled with conviction and passion, echoed through the room. "Today, we begin a new journey," she declared, her eyes sweeping across the crowd. New Beginning is not just an organization, it's a symbol of hope, resilience, and the belief that everyone deserves a second chance. "I want to thank everyone who made this possible, and I promise that we will continue to fight for a better future for all." The room erupted in applause, and many in the audience were moved to tears. Albert, standing proudly among the crowd, felt his heart swell with emotion. He knew that Laura was doing something truly extraordinary, transforming her past into a powerful force for good, creating a legacy that would impact countless lives. As Laura looked out at the sea of faces, she knew this was just the beginning. With Albert by her side and the strength of her convictions guiding her, she was ready to continue the work that had become her life's purpose. Together, they would ensure that New Beginning became a beacon of hope for those in need, offering a chance for a brighter, more just future. And so Laura's journey came full circle. from a young girl on the streets to a powerful advocate for justice and hope. With Albert's unwavering support and the strength of her convictions, she transformed her life experiences into a force for good, helping those who need it most. Her story is a testament to the power of resilience, compassion, and the belief that everyone deserves a second chance. What have you learned from Laura and Albert's inspiring journey? Comment below with one thing you've learned and how you plan to bring it into practice in your own life. We'd love to hear your thoughts. If you enjoyed this video, please leave your comment below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more inspiring stories like this one. Thank you for watching.